Rinpoche first requests us to place our minds in the noble disposition of bodhicitta with the intention of studying and practicing Dharma in order to bring all sentient beings throughout the infinity of space to the state of utterly perfect, totally pure and most precious enlightenment. And in our studies of Dhamma, we are presently looking at this text on Mahamudra called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya, and in that text we're in the section dealing with the peaceful stability of the mind, or shamatha. In the last explanation of the shamatha techniques, we were mainly looking at how to work with an external support in terms of a small pebble or a piece of wood, some object to look at on the outside, and now we turn to an inner support for shamatha. The being able to just let one's mind settle into a totally pure and natural state, into what is called a state beyond contrivance, beyond conceptual fabrication, is difficult for a beginner. And it's quite helpful to have some sort of focal point, some sort of anchor for the mind in order to move towards such a state. When, in order to provide some focal point for the mind, we use something that's not external and gross, but something which is internal and much more subtle, then we can do things like in the heart center, we visualize the form of the Buddha, or one of the forms of the Buddha, or we can imagine or visualize in the heart center seed syllables such as the letter A, the syllable A, or the syllable Hong, or else we can imagine small balls of colored light which are in the heart center. Whichever one of those objects it is, doesn't matter too much because it's there mainly as an anchor or a focus for our awareness in order to help the mind to settle into something profound.
La sono ton le maresi che te do ndabore de ko je do ni kala ta sonji ndawo yin na yon ta sonji ka la mi tong ji ma tu de ni o zu do do xiang ko lo la so ba ta gen do xiang chen ta jian cha lu ta ka ren ndawo sang ge song dong da la ne ri ni mi de me je ba ko xiang xiao zang la mi ba de ni a ta ba ji la mi ba xie yo na yin na yon a yin zhe ka ren ndawo yin du xie ho yin zhe个要都得着了，弄把啦上那么动，他提领着我去上那动个那用卡头卡领着我动，他这啦上那么动吧，他小咱们去了真咱去些你讲那也不有吧的。
So, when we use such a support, then we are not actually taking it as a focus of meditation in the sense of making clear all of its details. It's not like developing a visualization in other practices where, for instance, if it's the image of the Buddha, we would be looking at all of the special marks and signs and the way that each part of the body is disposed. It is set. Not at all. Or if it's a seed syllable, we're not looking at actually how the letter is formed, how each part of the letter has its shape and connects with the next part. Or even if it's a light sphere that we're imagining in our heart center, we're not getting into the details of the color and the nature of that sphere. Whichever one it is simply there. We just know it's there or assume it's there, and that becomes the focal point for our awareness, the anchor point. But any sort of thinking about it or exploring the details is not what we're doing at all.
Mi pa shiro madramba lupu yong de zo ji ma ni da wo si ma yong da wo si ma de da wo pa na de zo pen da wo ji yo re sen yong de zo ji ma lupu da wo ji che de ni no to pe che che re ga mon cho pa yong ji ma ta se da wo ji ma sa pa nyen da ku ti ri na de ni ne Pena sonji kan rawo chi na yung ozu to karin rawo jindu. Teni na hingo tongje karin rawo jindu. Teni na yuda, teni naza chi tsato re kari song re la ni pa. Po. Teni yeken rayi na yung ta ya ga chung. Onya ta leko ta chala re song no tong. Teni tilili na ya dambo yamba tong. Teni kado dong chi pa. re la sono dong ta den di na pian tu yo ba re ni le bo yong de zo yi zu zhen zhen zha wo xie wa de zo ji zu zong zha wo xie ta den di xie wo na yong de zo ji pian tu yo ba re.
When we actually start to meditate, then several things can happen. Sometimes when thoughts are becoming more and more distracting, the mind is getting busier and those thoughts are pulling away the mind from just sitting in a relaxed way with its focus. Then what we can do to restore the meditation is to relax what we don't do, first of all, is we don't tighten up. We don't try to discipline the mind. We don't try to forcibly take it away from the thoughts. That's what we don't do. What we do is to relax the body a bit, relax the posture from being, a very the posture that was described in the first place. It's actually a good thing to slump a little bit, to relax the muscles a little bit, just to ease off a fraction so that you're not so perfectly placed in the 7-point posture or however you're sitting, but you feel more relaxed in the body. Your mind, rather than tightening up, just relaxes, doesn't get concerned or stressed about the thoughts that are happening, and this should help the thoughts to diminish and the awareness to come back from that busyness to settling with the focus of either just the general idea of the Buddha or the seed syllable or the sphere of light in the heart center. That's one thing that can happen. Another thing that can happen is that, on the contrary, rather than the mind being busy, that as the meditation goes along, then we are slumping more into a sort of a torpor. The mind's getting duller, more hazy, more sleepy and thick. Then, if that's the case, at that point it is useful to start concentrating on the details of what's in the heart center. So if we have, for instance, an image of a small Buddha Shakyamuni in the heart center, then one would start to look at the details of the Buddha's body, of the head mound, of the eyes, or of the robes, and so on. And just by very quietly and gently focusing on those details with some precision, then this can help lift the mind out of the torpor. Or if it's a seed syllable, like the letter A or Hung, or whichever one it is, then we can study the shape very precisely, how each stroke of the letter curves and joins up with another stroke of the letter. This also should help. Or if it's a ball of light, we can concentrate on the color and the shape and how it is. Also, if that mind has become very dull, then it's good to discipline the posture, to pull oneself up straight, to lift up and pull up the head so that the posture is a very disciplined one. It sort of shakes one up, wakes one up.
Tatindi seni gam tatindi sedi dilana tati dezoji sani sha ta zu takare dinana hini gam hyo bari data. Teni hini go zawat kadere dina sen ya pu ki do no tu thang ji mo cho ba sen de zoji hyoban da wo ji choji di tare de yan ba shiro ta 소아마리 조윤원이 조어도 힘이 있다. 다도 미라고도 단 어떤 말을 받대 동티. 대 저기 현이 대 저기 산이 봐야 보지 통지 디타로 그래.
So those are the methods, and these are the methods that take us to, we should help take the meditation to where it's meant to be going, which is to a state where the mind is more settled. The mind is peaceful. The mind stays with its object. This is the very nature of shamatha. This is what our work is taking us to. A mind which is free from the power of thoughts. It's no longer carried here and there by thoughts, but it is at rest and peaceful and with its object.
다 드리시에 군데라 다 검 까까라 깔리야 가본다고 숑 그냥 생반 통화용 맞죠 반다고 숑 용 까까라는 너도 빼기 모른다 진도 통화한다고 까까라 숑 이 까까라 이나용 다 땅가로서 대저지 뭐도 뭐 발라는 통본다와 미발라 때니 단 주반다고도 지 생만 접바 몽보 이양거 제공하래. 드리 용 공도 때라는 생마저 밥에 저때 강가라 용 때다 드리라를 쇼공하래. 데 드리라를 쇼공이 가라 땅가롱 그 우더 농라미가 우더 샤라파동 드니 우더 샤라파동 차도 되래 가래 저봐 샤라피편 드니 샤라피편 차도 되라는 주 농라 주때 좀 먹어 봐 샤라는 우더 요니 드니 히바다용 반홍 시반홍 동바 되라는 히바데 너도 이야공 도마지 봐 이 반홍 동바 되라는 강제 되나다 히바데 우더용 샤라파 편이 주 농라 먹어 봐 드니 래 공모모 세나 드니용 삼바 멋지 반다고 동 산대 조지 다 능한다고지 농도 몽진다고 되다 대 조지 바 현이 배마다고 요바래 다 드니 세니 강거든.
Sometimes in the practice, our mind is very, very busy with thoughts. It's all over the place, and that's quite upsetting. It's quite distressing. And then also, not on account of the practice, but sometimes because of what's happening in our lives, the circumstances with the people we live or work with, something's gone wrong, there's something that's very preoccupying, and our mind is busy with that or quite upset about something and can't stop thinking about it, and therefore you can't meditate, you can't achieve this shamatha where the mind is simply, peacefully settled with its object. Then there's also something that can be done that's quite helpful in such circumstances, and this is using the breath. And there, in the practice, when you breathe out, then you don't breathe back in straight away. As you breathe out, your breath is breathed out into space in front of you, and not only do you leave your sort of breath there without breathing in the next in-breath for a while, but also you let your awareness just stay with the space, just vacant space in front of you. It goes with the breath, so you breathe out and then you wait for a while before breathing in. You don't wait until it's desperate and you have to breathe in, but you hold the breath out for some seconds and you keep your awareness with the open space in front of you where the breath has been exhaled, and then you take in your next breath, and when that breath is exhaled, again you leave some seconds, some time, and you let your awareness stay with open space in front. And this can be very beneficial. Doing that quite a few times for quite a sequence of breaths can settle the mind from that busyness, from that distress, and help it come back to its focus.
드니 나로도 생바치 보메 생란다 만다 된 깔린테 다 드니 레디 되라나 또 나로서 우라오도 농라 존도 되디오 바래 농라 도고 농라 우도 존도 드니 생란다 만다 된 드니 되디오레 때때 인디라 디위도 파샤라 동니 시 동전다라는 니 동바텔라는 미바테 다 드니 시나 빼 변동다고 요래 나로 그때나 빼 변동도 된디.
Actually, Rinpoche says, in his own opinion, this is a very, very helpful meditation, because we find that when the mind is either very busy or very distressed, in the way just described, then actually, when that's happening, it's to do with a certain retention of the breath. We tend to be holding the breath when that happens. And the simple fact of holding the breath out, and at the same time, while the breath is out, focusing the mind on the emptiness, the voidness of just the space where the breath has gone. The breath goes out, and then one's just focused on the emptiness. One's not actually dissolving the problems into the emptiness. One is immediately just focused on the emptiness of the space. It's very, very helpful.
다 된디도 감 야포레보 숑고나 드니용 곰바 겐발라 손노 동구디
맞아.
가르레라나 pena tati ka sang ngaron de di tira no di chaba je ni ko se da chon dia ta da chon ni ngaro gong je ko se ga na te zo ji ka le kha bon da sem ba ma chi pa ro de me na de bon da yo re yan na yong ta ngaro so mi ge zu man tong sa na he ga da mo ho sa zhe so sa re ja me sa de sa ji lan rong sa yo ma re ka chong ngaro no na on bon da chong san yo cha de la de le de yo ba re ga yin na de na de tong je pa pong ge na pong sa ro ma re demanda tra mri se ji mo se se ji le la bore ma ya mi de me pa se a ju de me pa se ta se ga na de ni da ko ji me re ji me re de ta phen tu yo ba ma re de phen tu me de ra no de nga ro pe na da tho ko na di da de pe du ju an du ta da de ya nian bo men du ma ren pa di da da la hi ba ti de na nga ro zu la hi ba ti ba ta ba ti da da la ko ro rong ga da de ta nian bo men du ba ta sa la song no ma tong ba ko ro da xi xia zang ji la ne ni de gang xi hi ba ti sa de da la xi pe na da da ka song ga ro de ga la mi ba xi ya de da da ga ro so san ga no la ne gam ta ban da do ji ti lin da ye hen da gang xi ya pe de no yo ga ti da ko ron de la hi ba ti ni da ka le gang xi Kipati sa dala si teni san yembalang troma chepa dayo na dala kipati teni si na teni dago no pa yung mundu teni dago ngaro so gon jizin ra chon du.
When the shamatha practice is going fairly well, but then there is something happening, like we take the example of the rain that's falling just now, and this pitta-patta sound of the rain that's falling quite strongly at this end of the shrine room, because there are the two little things on the roof. I don't know what it's like down the other end, but anyway, there's quite a loud noise from the rain. And so if the meditation would be going well, except for the sound of the rain, which is distracting and disturbing, otherwise everything's fine, so that you're concentrated on whatever it is, say the Buddha at the heart center or sphere of light, but you find that this noise of the rain is stopping you from really having a nice sort of absorption into what you're meditating on. You keep thinking about it, and now you think, oh, it's a blooming nuisance, this rain, and wish it would stop, and otherwise the meditation's going so well. It's just rotten rain started falling. And so rather than thinking that way and being distracted and blaming the rain, then just as in the same way when we used an external object, like a pebble, and we set the mind on the pebble, or just as today when we have an internal object that's visualized, and we meditate, we focus the mind on the Buddha in the heart center, or a seed syllable, just like that, we turn our attention to the rain itself, and it becomes the sound of the rain, and it becomes the focus of our practice. So then the sound that's in our hearing consciousness as the rain pitter-patters, second after second, becomes the meditation object. That way we don't need to blame it or think of it as a distraction, because in itself it becomes the focus of our shamatha practice. We're not in shamatha aiming at some sort of abstract state of peace which is totally away from the senses. If we were, it would be very easy to achieve. We just need to destroy our eyesight, destroy our hearing, destroy our nervous system so that we feel things, and then once the mind was free from sense inputs, we'd have achieved profound shamatha. It's obviously not what we're aiming for. We need to be able to find peaceful stability along with the sense inputs. We're not trying to shut off the senses. That's not possible. So then when there is something like the sound of the rain or noise or something visual, then we can also use that as the basis for practice.
Then you raise your body lobola. They try and go to Takare, Sonakari Ka, no, he need Gonji, Tenda, which is Rizzi, Yaboji gone. A Hitagan. The man, Tagonji, the man, that me by the mates and I think Gamba Katwa gone, the Mepando Chosuna, they gone up Yaji upon Romandi. Tinana, Zu, Dra, Ro, Reja. Ka从的刚新开机都卡从的广东新开机凶呢，等你刚刚个人天呢地个是啦，变那人头呢，他做啦刚接点点能地有吧机，这头呢这啦刚加新一个电视能地有吧机，这错呢用这啦新一个电桥呢刚接新开机，肉有我那用等于肉啦新一个电视刚接新开机。Reja yo ona yo, reja la yon teni hini ga gang ye hinke ji shuna. Teni hini yabu da wo chog du. Dime mi pa ji da wo ji ni da wo ji dime teni hini ga tian xie sa gang ji me pa da wo chog suna. Di mi pa de me na teni yan ba tang ji de gang ma ba da wo chog suna. Teni kali ka bo. Teni gang la yon ya ji xie ro mien ge. Te teni yin di de la na ta gong zhen gong tu ka re da wo yin na ka zong wa hini gang re dio ba ji du hini ge gang dong ha gong ge ji yo na teni gang li la bo no chog du.
So it could be the sound that's the focus of attention. It could also be a smell, an odor. So there might be a very delightful smell. There might be an unpleasant smell. And either of those can become the focus of your awareness, or it could be a taste, it could be sweet, delicious food, it could be very not nice tasting food. It could be physical sensations such as heat, cold, the coarseness of the texture of what you're wearing, or the softness of the texture of what you're wearing. Any of the senses can become the object of meditation. This is very good because it expands the field of our meditation, and it doesn't mean that we can only meditate when we have a very, very specific type of focus. We don't want that. If the only time we can do shamatha is when we have a certain setup and a certain focus for the mind, and then with that we can attain some peace and some stability, then our shamatha will never grow, it will never expand, and that won't be very good for us. If, on the contrary, we can take anything that we're experiencing as our new focus for meditation, as our new anchor point for settling the mind, then in this way our shamatha can expand and be applied in more and more circumstances. So this means that whenever our mind's awareness is operating through the visual consciousness, then whatever we see can become whatever our eyes are seeing and our mind is aware of, that can become the basis for practicing shamatha. Whenever our mind is aware through the hearing consciousness and there's a sound, that very sound can become the basis for settling our awareness, placing our awareness, our shamatha with the sound. Whenever there is a smell, good or bad, that smell can become the focus for shamatha. Whenever there is flavor in the mouth and taste, then that flavor in the mouth can become the focus for shamatha. Whenever there's physical sensation, heat or cold or hunger or thirst or texture, then that can become the new focus for meditation. In that way, all of the data that's coming in through the senses can become the new anchor point for our shamatha, and that way it spreads and spreads, and we have so many opportunities for shamatha throughout the day.
Ngaro Ganji di Tirana, Nindi, she gone. Woman, Nindi, she. Tapi Missy, she gonna be Takundu, what is the Kalikabundi? Here you may imitate to the Nindi, she didn't. Cote to the Tadi Telakipati, Yeribote, Ganja, 다가 히바가 대제가 전시 다 된디신 배휴메시 나온 차고는 대스깔리 가고 요지레티 싫어 차고 많이 봐 대저진들이 세니 드니 달라 히바디 강제 다가 밑에시 대든디시 그래 아탄 나랑 강제디 대화 요지 말에 동한 요지 가르시 그래 대하나 길 말이 나로서 까까서 동한 중래 까까를 대화 요래 대화 요강 기니야 보지 그 강트게지도 dunga yung kheni ya puji gang thang ge jire gware de me dunga yung na gang ma hi na teni yung kheni ge phato man du ya teni dewa yung na ho gang ma hi na kheni ge phato me re de yung li ko do le re ho dunga yung na gang ma hi na dunga go li ko na phato me bare dewa dunga ga re na yung ndo na na kheni ge tan da wo ji de kheni gang thang ge ra wo ji yin ji me ni shong ga bare teni na ga rong ge yung da te ni tan de de jo ye cha bo yung ma yin ba teni se wo ye rin bo gam ta teni se There's
one practice that's done, that Rinpoche himself has done, many people do, that's quite beneficial. And this is that you dig your thumbnail into your hand so that there's some pain. You don't overdo it. This is not self-mortification, but you dig it in to the point where you can feel some pain, and you keep it there so there's a continuous unpleasant sensation, and then this becomes the focus for your shamatha, so that the mind places itself with this sensation of pain and learns to take the pain as a focus for the peaceful abiding, for the shamatha. And we need to do this. We might think, what's all this about? I thought meditation was to get us out of suffering and to take us to nice places, and here we are hurting ourselves as a basis for practice. What's all this? What's going on? But of course, when there is suffering, this is the time when we need the power of meditation. It's not the time when we need to lose meditation. On the contrary, when the mind is either in suffering or when it's in a state of happiness, these are also occasions for the development of meditation and for the development of shamatha. So then it's very helpful just to do something like that. There's no particular place, but it's quite convenient just to dig a nail into your hand like that, and not to hurt yourself too much, but so that there is a pain, there is discomfort, and we can learn how shamatha can cope with that. You can still be in a meditative state when the mind is either suffering and also when the mind is very joyous. Otherwise, what happens is the suffering carries us away. We lose focus, we lose meditation. Happiness carries us away. We lose focus, we lose meditation. In this way, as was described before, our shamatha practice expands into every area of life.
Ta tendi chegong ta zangdu de so che yabu che gam ta tendi chegundu teni ngaro so tujela ganje ta tendi che de la na bena ngola ki chalon da yo teni ganja na yabu yore kare dina ngaro so nyanda ku ta tendi re ro de la na gam mo bo jin chola chong bare teni na dong chong da wo du dong chong chino lu go ji che dong chong dino la che lu ngola yo den de de dori che po na na lamba cha wa re nye yung tu wa re teni che ding ngola dong chong yo den de zo de ma pe nga yin mo teni zo ganje ni ngaro so to por mo che wo ngamba ngola na chumi yo ni nyama chung ni la 띵인 지 기공원아 강자 시든지 해진 요 바래 든지 인디 때라나 ngola yung jalondawo inanda ta tindi gani tindi ganja tindi sena yo khona kholong gondu tindi mo ya to gonde yo ya go ganja na phato yore ngaro uni zong du shi tindi sena ngama nga dadandawo mendu zong du yo ya bo ngama yo nga lo nye he phasen za jin dawo re ti ka sa nga lo ji do dawa ka hi la lama ma to mo jin thong ma so nga pe zong du shi de pe da gang ka che bu che tindi se ja yin tindi na 다 정로 대조 지세 강야 보세 근데 되면 정로를 맞이 들이시나 대조 지그 강 배도 배자 전부 더 터면
And what really benefits a shamatha is to persist in the practice and to apply diligence to the practice. Do as much of it as one possibly can, and then this produces the results. And one thing that the meditators in our tradition have often done, which is very helpful for diligence in practice, is to balance something on top of the head. And then there are various objects you can put. In the past it's been, sometimes it can be even butter lamps or a bowl of water that you put on the head. And then of course whenever you start to lose the posture or you slump or you start to fall asleep, then it falls off, it falls in your lap and you realize that you're wandering away. It's a very good way of having a very focused, diligent meditation practice. And it's something, for instance, in our own tradition, the great master Karmapa could sit for 12 days non-stop with something balanced on the head like that. And it's a practice that's currently used. Rinpoche himself, when he says around, I forget what he says, around 19, 20, 21, I forget, but around that time, he said he really set himself to diligence in meditation in this way, and for more than a year and a few months, he didn't see anybody but meditated very strictly like that, and it's very beneficial to have such diligence, because with that diligence and one-pointed application, then some results and benefit come out of the practice.
Tani benana dingolana chyo ozo chi mumbo nda wo yo ngola yo ta tiri shedi la ni chyo da ma po hong song ji ge chwa yan ba chi le hong re tan di chyo da ka re hong ma hong gong ji re song tani ra chwa ji le hong re di chwa da la hi ba de gong hini gong na pe ya po du nga tani she nyu benana de la chyo gong ji yo tiri shi ge ni go na tanto te to jing na ko chuma po ra te la to pan ra wo ji chen na du ni ti to ba ta la chen ten xie mi ten ta la xie gong jia yuan e ni ji ju po ra du e ji mu ni ji ko long di chua ji wo ra tan de ma po hong song ji ti chua ta la hi ba de ka re ta la ha de ge ka ma ra wo do nga ru mi ba de dong ta la xie gong jia yuan na ji he ni ge tian e ya po du.
Rinpoche is really advising this technique. He said when you've got a bowl of water on the head like that, of course when the bowl of water falls off, then you get wet. So once you've got the bowl of water on the head, then there is this constant concern for not letting it fall. There's the awareness of it sitting on top of your head. So there are all of these different sensations. There's the sensation of the bowl itself. There's a sensation of your own unwillingness for it to fall and make you wet, your own need for it to stay just where it is and for the meditation to be good. It really keeps the mind in focus. He said he's found it among the various ways of focusing the mind, a very, not just an effective technique, but he says it's quite a comfortable technique. It's quite a convenient, comfortable technique to use.
Teni tang harong so sushi o radio bare mo chiada te indu tenilana sushi o to sta sen da kari ore dina kakale che boyore kakale du boyore jawabe mato pa ndawo chire muni sen mato pa ndawo chodore kakape che boyore kakale no che boyo bare pe di no ge ngaro so gwa jana kakale o so gwa ya po pure kakale gwa ya po pu mare chepan ore kari lana Maro sosi kakal no achi bore, kakal no achi po mare. Tandra uchi pare, kakal gang ya po pore, kakal gang ya po po mare. Tatra, ta sosi go ronghi dinanda, sosi go ronghi na ko tendire. Te tendi de lana ta gang pu nanda, gang ma pu nanda. Dona ngaro ya po zong shi. No jen nanda, no ma jen nanda. Ya po zong shi, gang na. Tenina kali xie tenina ji bo dong ma ji ba de yong ya bo ji ka zong wa ji ban de wo ji chuo 데본다고 지죠. 강 푸비가서 뭐가 대용 파 데본다고 쳐. 로게도 강다고 해야 보지죠. 드리려 말이 상도 야 보지 거나.
We are, what could you say, regular people. The technical term in Buddhism is ordinary beings. We are ordinary beings. It's a term that distinguishes us from realized beings, Aryas. So we are ordinary beings. All ordinary beings have their ups and their downs. It's the impermanent nature of our minds. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're unhappy. That's very, very normal. We are regular beings. It's the most normal thing that our minds go up and down. And it's very useful to be able to accept that as a fact. That's how we are, that's what happens. And it's the same with meditation. Sometimes the meditation works just as it ought to, sometimes not at all. Sometimes it's working well, sometimes it's working poorly. This is very normal, and it's very useful to be able to accept that as normal. When the meditation is going well, and that makes us feel comfortable, and then when the meditation is not going well, and we feel very disturbed and upset because it's not working, if we can accept that, then the distress and the joy that comes along with the impermanent experience of meditation as it goes up and down, that will gradually disappear into a state of calmly joyful acceptance of the impermanent nature of all experience and of meditation experience. So it's very helpful.
단도 주두거나 히니라 이거 다 선. 로니 지난다 롱바 여저도 이거 시니 다 자와니 바리 자와지도 가르리디나 다 시고 보라고 이제도 자와지도 다 드리게지고 농라 손이 감지 다 드니 자와도 그래 드니 다 연랑다고 다 가르리디나 다 주다 저로 레자다 가리나 카 좀 히니가 땡야고 저지지고 다 드니라고 지리 다 해자해나 히니라 베 제 롱더니 지데가 다 바노 동바라 소바라 베다 히니 그 강타 베 뭐보여 바래 레티 너 수두가나 다 롱라 다 세니샤 가리 통리가나 간디 미 바가다 더 간디나 드니 이게 더 요니 이 간나 디디오 바래.
So to sum up, then the very nature of shamatha is that the mind is settled naturally with its focus. That's what we're doing with shamatha. We're learning to have the mind that sits naturally, that settles naturally with whatever its focus is. In order to achieve that, we use two sorts of basis or anchor point. External ones, such as we have with the pebble and the piece of wood, or internal ones, such as were described today. External and internal focuses that help us learn to settle the mind with whatever that focus is. And then, if we look at some of the main details, then whatever is happening through the sense doors, what's seen, heard, smelt, tasted, or touched, that also can become the focus for letting the mind settle naturally with it. And apart from that, then once we develop shamatha into all of the different possibilities of focus, then we get very many indeed. We get the various uses of the breath, the ways of looking at space and using space or the sky or distant sky and space as a focus, and so on and so forth. There are many details, but the essence of it is that.
당아로도 감제도 되라나 다 세샤니 다 강라 바존라고 지난다 몸보요 바리 레데 나롱 소나 수두거나 바주 닌다오지 체휴 등하로서 거나 렌디 다 지드 가린다오 지레라나 마로서 거 용 통도 자나 베나 두소 시로메 나가마 제종아 드리라 다 거진 캐 그 머신나 다 바주 체휴 가리라나 노도 드레디오 바레 요템 모템 거야 보시지만도 노도 드레디오레 드니나 다 양 림보 최소 니삼다 드니 거진 캐라 다 바주 체휴 다 가가선 드라마레디 다 시샤기시 선노동나 녀쿠시도 또 세먼타세 로감자 올리 가리레 올리 하모 다 녀쿠나다 쿠미나다 다 너나 세무파도 녀쿠 바주 디 바주 니오레 영토나 오 데모텐도 영 리나 다 쿠발라소파 만타세 로제 다 바주 드니 체휴 마로서 건레 요레
When we're actually doing the practice, there are two main sorts of obstacle we encounter. Of course, there are many things which are obstacles in the sense of things which stop us from having a very successful and effective settling of the mind. But there are two main ones. One is that for those people who don't have a lot of time to meditate, those people who only have, say, a 15-minute meditation spot, there the main obstacle to having a settled mind will be many thoughts, a very busy mind, lots of mental activity, lots of thoughts, and that will be what's stopping the mind in that short meditation period from settling, as it should do, settling clearly and naturally with its focus. The other main obstacle, on the contrary, is for those who have a lot of time to meditate, who can meditate for 1, 2, 3 hours in a session. Then the main obstacle can very often become sleepiness, dullness of the mind, torpor, this sort of thing.
다 대라너 가송아 라인 다디 바초드 미지 바초드 세다 다 종슈도 가리레라나 다 시차라 알아서 소시 오래 자디데라 까까라 강야 보림보다고요 까까라 머리바요 링 하말라야 된다고 요레데 다 공다 주 소시 오지나 너나너 강야 보 깔리카보리 까까라 요나 까까라 요 말이 다 인디테라나 티 바초 남바니데 가디나 헤니키오레 다 데라나 용 통통 가서 까마 영강아 라이야 종 뭐보 까마가 라미에서 따티 종 뭐보 영 통도 배 뭐보시 가나 티 바조 카츠마도 더 세트디오레 카츠마도 더비 바조 통지 그 세다 그 잡으라고 쳐디오레 가르디나 마롱 그 녀용디도 그 선을 보나요 다 여히 문이 다 데레데 가라고 되는데 근데 시사 진짜 마타지 선바 만다바레 가 만다바레 롱롱 라티즈 티즈 카요지레티 다 나롱티나 나롱라 라치 선노도나 양 통도 종모 세지도 야휴 라오지레 선지 근데 저런서 롱롱 선노동 롱롱 다 생라 가린 토 가리레 롱롱 강제 따그라 디나용 다 나티나 다더니 야휴 이래도 돼도
These two main obstacles will happen, and as Rinpoche just said, we are ordinary beings, and there'll always be ups and downs in our practice. Sometimes when it goes well, sometimes when it doesn't go so well, and then these two particular main obstacles will probably be predominant features in the practice, if they're short sessions or long sessions. And the way to overcome them, the way to vanquish these two sorts of obstacles is what was explained yesterday. It's to Rinpoche's own mind, the king of obstacle dispellers, for both those types of obstacles, a very, very, very effective means of practice, and this is to meditate in very short but high quality bursts, as he explained, with 3, 4, maximum 5 minutes only. But in those 5 minutes, or those 3 minutes, there is the very finest focus. And then a little break, and then do it again, as was explained before. This is so effective in developing good shamatha, and it's also effective in overcoming the power of great busyness and thoughts. If that's the obstacle, it's also effective in overcoming the sort of torpor and sleepiness. If you do have several hours of practice, then those several hours can be broken up into these short but high quality bursts of meditation.
다가 힘이 빠지 단도나 뒤뒤지 되나라 놓자래 되니 힘이 다가 니가를 배도 요바리래 토모공도 용때 타바래 되니 다들 배도 요 말에 싫어 되니 토모 많이 빙고도 조금은 힘이 저렇게 말해 되니 뒤라나 안도나나 니가를 배도 또 된바지 말해 배나 나로도 생기본다 매 드리세가 되라나 말하라고 다 생기보 쳐지고 니가를 배지 세니 총라고 통다 드리세도와 배대라고 되니 배나나 너 야보면나 너라 다 야보면은 드리세가나 고 야보통 야보메 받은 통문도 파 요거나 파 야본다고 지ren도 고 대라고 힘이 더 배대라고 임바래 가리드나 녀모바 노도 모본초 드리세가나 파히니 거나 파ቆ니더 파야 총마지 노도더 야 시마지 파피 게고 바래 베나다다 노고 더 바지오나 단들이 통되나 야보데 메레 드리나 코론 드리세가나 파 제보라 야보 쳐줘래 대디들 파토나데 조바든 통문도 도만도나 다 제보라지고 바래 된다고지 노도도 저다다 야시오나 생기보면지 생기보면거나 희니가 더 제마지 파까이고 바래 레디 다 너파래 자디들 줄해디오 바래 고드보 통도 바래 코론 파까이고 바래 되면 문인도 야보 세트메레 대이나나 니카를 배도 되면 다들 배도 요바 말이 다 니카를 가르쳐 그러지나 너 야보지 파 조마시 야보지 세거나 너 거면디 코론 가린 통나요 코론 야보리디오 바리 근데 인디 되라나 다 던라오지 가리 걸리지나 다 랑통도 가리 랑통거 니까 용 대바시 타바리 다도 용 대바시 타바리 투모공우도 용 토타바리 초공우도 용 토타바리 대인디나 거정가마 다 랑통도 가리 되니 랑통라 다 도지의 야보지레지지다 희니라 배도 요바리 배나라 나로서 초메 바나 롱몽보 요나 초메 데로바리 초메 야바디오나 롱레고나 초메 데로도 되니나 달라 란다오지시 롱몽고시지 그거가나 되니 초메데 야보 진바 야보 지신다레 오마리 더라고 희니가 다 배도 요바리 마도 데일라나 배난 초메라 희니가 어디 롱고마지나 배도 메리디 다 롱마고나 초메의 고론 파 데모로실 배도 요바리 되면 초메 야 시르 로진다 되니 배도 요바 마라 배대라고 다 희니더 니가를 배도도 된바지레 되면 다도 되바데 말이 랑동 니가도 다도 카총와라 대 배도 제보 요바리 되니나나 마로서 희니라 쳇더 존이 다 희니베 송진 로진다고 희니베 다 도진다고 인사가 자기가나 던지면도 되니나나 희니도 니가 정지를 배도 진도 더 당하로서 관자지레 되니 희니가 미바용 다로도 정지도 더 희차이
I forgot to say in the last section that this advice about doing short sessions, Rinpoche said he's found that himself, from his own experience, has been the king of remedies and something that's very, very useful. But then each person has their own experience, and it's up to us to try it for ourselves and to see if, for us also, it's a very, very effective aid for meditation, and something which dispels those two obstacles of busyness of mind or of torpor. Now, what we've been studying up until now is shamatha, this way of peacefully settling the mind with its focus. It's a meditation that has benefit, that is for sure, but the benefit is only a temporary benefit. The benefit is only a provisional benefit, and the accomplishments, the siddhis or the accomplishments of meditation that can come out of it are only what are known as the common accomplishments or the general accomplishments. Shamatha alone cannot bring ultimate benefit, it cannot bring the ultimate siddhis. It just can't. And what it does, what it can do, is to cover up the problems in our mind. It can cover up the defilements, the negativity, the anger, the passions, all the other things. They can be very, very well smoothed over by shamatha. And Rinpoche was making the example on the table here. You've got this red painted table, and there's a golden katak on it. So he was saying, if you've got the red table, then you can put this beautiful golden katak over the top, and then all you see is the beautiful golden katak. It looks very nice. You don't see the sort of rough red that's underneath it. So in that way, when our mind is troubled or disturbed, we can settle it in meditation, and then we're in a relatively peaceful state, and we can hone that and develop it over time, but it will never take away from the depths of our mind our angers, our passions, our jealousy, and all of those defilements. So then when he peels back the katak, and he says once the katak's not there, then nothing underneath has changed. Once the provisional power of this peaceful stability based on a focus is taken away, then what was always there in our mind stream in terms of those underlying negativities will still be there. And so if on the contrary, rather than covering up the table with a nice katak, a nice cloth, if you polish that surface itself, then you don't need to cover it up with something to make it beautiful. It's beautiful in itself. So if we can actually somehow work on those problems deep within the mind, what the things that need to go in themselves, then there is no need to have this state of peace which takes us away from them or for the time being covers them up. This way of dealing with the root of what's in the mind comes through insight meditation or vipassana, and this deep insight is really the most important thing. It's what brings us the ultimate siddhis as well as the temporary siddhis. It's what brings the ultimate accomplishment as well as a temporary accomplishment. And so that's very much what we want to achieve. But in order to achieve that, we need the support of shamatha. Shamatha is the basis upon which that insight can be found. And shamatha could be compared to a wind guard for a flame. If you have a flame, like a candle flame, then a gust of wind can blow it out. But if you have a windshield, I don't know what the name is in English, a photophore, something that's a protection around it that stops the wind from getting to it, then that flame can shine and be protected. So if we compare insight to a flame of wisdom, then shamatha is what nurtures it and enables it to shine and to burn away.
Please. Ngaroni takereminda.
You're okay. They just look. Police have come to see what we're up to.
아니나 다 랑통래 다 랑통 강통의 다홍아 만트니 해지 다 랑통래 아니 랑통의 다 자반자고도 랑통래 이제 다당하러 해래 디나 당이 랑통 가리시 강가리시 다티니 해지.
So then what is vipassana? Rinpoche will explain it to us in brief.
다 동보 가리조 하고 거라나 나로서 강진캔디 몬초거 바래 지기요래 카통아 거 라요래 몬초 세지도 가리지나 강제 하고 와라고 하래 강 가리조 하고 와래라나 다리까서 봐봐 쇼제 첨보 강 하고 와라고 하래 쇼제 첨보지 세지도 단들이 지ren 거 선지지 하고 등 모히소나 달라나 모초 심이더래.
The insight meditation is centered on one main thing, and this one main thing is what is called the introduction or the pointing out. This is an introduction to something. It is the pointing out of something. What is being pointed out, or what one's being introduced to, is generally known as Mahamudra, the Great Seal, or the Mahamudra. And so we need to understand what Mahamudra is, and then when it comes to the Vipassana or the insight meditation, there we are being introduced through insight into the actual nature of Mahamudra.
다 대인들라 동보 가리고 히거라는 쇼제 첨보 세지도 하고거 띠미드 당다 히르 운이 단들이지 생모도 조세 깔리까 버리디 찌도 야부지도 쇼제 첨보 세지도 찌도 야부지도 하고거 말에 다 가송아롱 쇼제 첨보 세요 다 자히지 몰라 히레 지바페 말이디 디바 말이 다 지두 진리지 진아라 드리지가 히 디가서라 첨보 세거 자히요 말이 첨보 세지도 가닐 거리지나나 쇼노고 추카통하라 고거리 진이 히레 콘디지 뒤비 추카통아 코와 냥냥디바 카통하라 첨보 세지도 디자리지 송지용 디노라 해디오 바리 생제용 디노라 해디오 바리 다 생제 노라용 다 리투 디 몸보 줘라 뜻세디디 카통하지 첨보 세지 디노라 디키오 바리 디니디 히오리.
So then first we need to understand something of Mahamudra. Mahamudra itself, as an experience or realization, is something very profound. But at first we can understand at least the meaning of the name itself, the term itself, Mahamudra. When we started this text on the very first day, when Rinpoche expounded the title of the text, then Mahamudra, Chachachempo in Tibetan, was the very first term that he developed. And you remember that in there are 4 syllables, and he gave us the meaning of each of the syllables. And if we take it as 2 terms, two notions. We have Maha, which means great, a Mudra, which means in the Tibetan way of doing it, seal. If we focus on this term great, Maha, then the meaning of that is absolutely all-encompassing. We can understand that as it applies to, or it covers everything that is inner and that is outer. It covers everything of samsara and everything of nirvana, which is the process of release from samsara. It covers everything that is of Buddhahood, and it covers everything that is of sentient beings. It applies, and the sentient beings are those of the 6 realms. So when we explore all those things, it is very vast indeed, all the things of the 6 realms and the path and so on. But the point is that Mahamudra is not something specific on its own. It applies to absolutely everything without exception.
Ta tindila te taba shaja chemboto ta ngarozo machila trawachi ko na bena ma shaja chembo gon hio la ke machila trawachi ko na chu tongnya gon hio ta je zmala taba go taba de gon hio songje jangde ne ge ta taban de wo ji chorong gon hio la na na yo re je go trawa lan tin di zu je gon je re 다 소제 전부 공효를 소제 전부도 빼야 보이레스 이 제스말라 따반다고도 동니가 따반다고도 송지가 따반다고 드디 공효를 요래 빼 야보이래 드디도 나 공효레스 말알래 드디도 추지지레.
So then if we ask the question to an accomplished Mahamudra practitioner such as Milarepa, then we say, are you meditating? Yeah, you're doing Mahamudra meditation. Yes. Or is that meditation on voidness? Then the answer would be yes. You say, is this the highest view within the Buddha's teaching, that of voidness? Is that what you're meditating on? Then the answer would have to be yes.
Tumi gong hiyo re lana ni trabachi tina nde gong hiyo re se tiri ga trabachi tina nga gong mare se nga la len tiri jejire nga gong hiyo mare se nga la len jejire hakoso ni trabachi pa ji tala tina trabachi pa tala ko len jeson mare machi la nga swaje chembo gong kya yin sen ga ji la Tori na shoje chimo gong hio la na tini chu kare zo gong hio re chu toni gong re la na ma toni gong re se pe malari pa gong ra wo chu gong hio re la na malari pa go shoje chimo gong hio ra nga malari pa gong ra wo gong hio re la re nga tini sonji gong je ra wo chu gong hio re nga sonji gong ra wo nga gong hi ta nga gong hio re nga shoje chimo gong ke ma re mo ya te nga la re te se du ko gong hio nga la tini su je re ni to tina 다음 팀마다라 야 저바 니바지 콜라티나 다추 제로서 샤제 좀 광캔라 광캔거 노셔 광히요레 예동 광히요레 뜨미 광히요레 인제 광히요레 이제 콜라는 저바고나 난 노셔 광마리 예동 광마리 예동 농바 뽕지레 나 예동 광마리 예동 페드초레 세고 나라랜 드리투 제 온지레
The Drupon and the Milarepa Drupal.
Mare, mola.
Mela.
Ronsa nga chosia gone yin la ke matela. Mala ripa dunde amandu.
Nene.
Ronsa mo nga chosia chembo gone yin la ke ji la nga droba ji ko na cheron su chosia chembo gone di ra na toni gone re se na toni ra gone yo re la. Tini mala ripa se pe nga droba to sonji ka ji pa yo re ti gone ra choro gone re la na nga gong yo re tini tiri la re trawa tombo la trawa nipa la tini chero so dosho ake don tumi la so nje tiri so chero so swaje chambo gong kya gong re la na nga gong mare tata pongjare tata yabu yoba mare nga la len jijiri nga tendu.
Sorry, I made a mistake in that first one. It's the meaning's there, but I made a mistake because with the Milarepa. Milarepa is Mila in Tibetan. Mila means also to a human being, or to somebody, to a person. And both of them came up in the same sentence. So then, forget Milarepa, just for a moment. And so then in that first question, if an experienced Mahamudra master asked a meditator, they might ask in the first question, are you doing Mahamudra? Are you doing this practice? Are you doing this, which is the highest view of the Buddha, voidness meditation? And their answer could be, yes, I am. So it's the same as what was just there. It's just it's not being asked to Milarepa, it's being asked by an accomplished master to a student who thinks they're practicing Mahamudra. Give the game away. But anyway, so it's clear. So they say, are you doing Mahamudra? Yeah. Is this the Buddha's highest view? You meditating on voidness? Yes, I am. That's the first question. Second question, are you meditating on desire? Are you meditating on anger? Are you meditating on ignorance? Are you meditating on negativity? And then if the person might answer, oh no.
Ta dombo nga shwaja chenpo gong re la yo pare. Ta shwaja chenpo gong di shwaja chenpo se di de la. Gare di na chu tongchi, kondi tongchi. Di no lo du pare di ke yo re. Chenpo no la kondi ka tswa ra. 야, 단 고아 인디디야. 근데 냥냥은 대파 이나 야, 단 말아리파 강지도 동년라고 송지 강지 인디. 레데 단 도서 해도 때문에 나가 말이 라지다. 코이 주 말이. 되나? 소자 첨부 강랭이 라디들라. 코디 그 추통지 강랭이 라요래. 되나? 들다. 고 노르소. 다고 뭐말라지도 지말라지디는 가서. 가리디나 콜라나 강 마냐지기도 강 추지기도 니. 동보 나 kunti chu thangchi nga gong hyo la jinda wore dure chu choje chembo nga gong la yin la ba ta tawa ko ong du de la tawa re 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 to ong du de la din no lo gong chu ji ji do gong mo chu ba ni zhe pa bong ji ji do chu lian ji ni de re go na de ni choje chembo de ni re mo de wa ta chembo re ma so ga re de na chembo no la ka chong la ko ma re ta chembo re ma su chu chu chwa so ga re la na pa gong ji ji do mo gong ji ni Lord, da, Koroka Lajita, da, Humada, never chosen to.
So if the meditator answered the meditation master in that way, yes, I'm meditating on voidness, I'm meditating on what Milarepa meditated on the Buddha's highest view, but no, I'm not meditating on passion and anger and all those things, then actually the meditator would be mistaken. That isn't Mahamudra. Because, as was just described, Mahamudra is all-embracing. It covers all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana. It applies to all of them. Everything that's within, that's without, and so on and so forth. So, there the meditator who would have been, in his practice, in some state of voidness, but not at all having a meditation that is based on passion or anger or those things. It's in some other state of voidness. Although they might be cultivating some of the phenomena that are conducive to nirvana, they're not at all working with the phenomena of samsara, which are passion, anger, all of the defilements, and so on. So we can't call it Mahamudra, because Mahamudra is something that applies to absolutely anything and everything. So then that person who answered in that way, yes, I'm meditating in voidness, no, I'm not meditating on anger and passion, they would have mistaken, they'd be mistaken to think they were practicing Mahamudra.
다 소제 첨부 건 힘은 돼요. 다 운이 세고 그만 건이 라오르데. 다 소제 첨부 건 초메레. 건 힘메레 가르레라나. 데 첨부 세지들에 뭐 돼요. 다 충실해 산이. 다 되니라 때니 두절랑 알아서 마주바 건이 라요 바래. 더용 다 마셔 바래 오래. 가르레지나 두포도 파뽕 야포지 투 건근도야. 되니 마주바 가르레 오늘 주찬도야. 두포도 건이야 뭐 야포 건근도야. 야포 건거나 야포도 투 래. 줄 두포도 파뽕 가라. 다들 저들이라 되잖아. 다 마주바 이거 가 마주바 건이를 라지도 도매로 잡아래. 카고 마주바를 차리되면 더 마주바 로터미래. 되니나 말로서 처제 전부 세제도 취통제가 다득 문이 인디테라나 레라보지 그 마주바 결세려더니 요가 조슈지도 강히지도 때니래요 말이 베나너 나로바라지나 마하벤르다 노주 취통제 랑아니바 벤르다 처리디 예나용 도노 쇼지셴보 고마히니 깔리페 모보자니 데로바라 때니 나비 쇼지셴보 고히 요라 나로서까지 비 나타노라 딘디시디디라 나로서 조로서 레라보지 그다 마주바도 쇼지셴보 고히 요선 데데나 노르디오 바레 두소 톨로레디오 바레 괜히 레도지 요지레 나타는디 괜히 라고 레도지리 파탈라 고한테디시나 괜히 다 미바티안 자들이 자리 괜히 라고지 문이 고히디 요지레 마도 쇼지셴보 고히 미레 딘디시나 베나 뒤진랑 알아서 라마 카통하고 조로서 마주바가 마주바라 등문이래 마주바지 고히나도 야보레디디 알아서 치도 야보레 마도 동안 알아서 마주바 깔리카 보요래 베나 다다들이 좀보지츠 감 두저도 감아니나 근데 마주바 처음이야 베나 너도 몸보지 가고나 땅아 고야 부분도 되나 근데 너도 봉거나 근데 마주바 레면도야 가래 제가 저도 쭉근도야 너도 매미지 틀려하거든. 너도 요바지 피봉거든. 대모 마주바 처음이야. 조로서 대차 리리리도 써놓야 보통거든. 근데 레 라보지 가로서 런도 간지도 마주바 간지도. 문제야. 딱 가래라 효레지나 간케 놓고 딱 너도 먼저바 생야 보인디도 가 간야 보하고. 나 소제 전부 야보 간요. 너도 몸보 진짜거든. 나 대저지 간야 보면도 소제 전부 간마히. then shwaja khenbu dragno katswade chu tangji indu ka bare maju pa seje to no to yo nanda ma yo nanda de katswade maju pa se ka bare de tini se de shwaja khenbu yo chwa ma maju pa yo chwa ma re ka zang ji ma to dang do muni re ma de ta cha la ngu chong ka la nga la hi me ngo man chong khen la tini hi men khen la ta tini zo ga na nga ro zo ga da da me ni de chwa ro de 대송 돌아오는데 예니래 로지 마도 니깔 패도 마도 다디도 니깔 패도지래면도 되더니나 조로서 선노야 보도나 되니 패도 지보 마요 공지를 같은데
There was one thing I left out in the previous burst of translation, and this meditator who thought that the Mahamudra was resting in some state of voidness, but wasn't something that applied to absolutely every experience of the mind, is somebody who still is in a state of mind where there's the feeling there is something to be found, there's something to be cultivated and adopted, and there is something to be gotten rid of from the mind. And when it's like that, it means the person hasn't got insight into the meaning of Mahamudra. It's a sign that the person hasn't been introduced to the nature of Mahamudra. They haven't successfully had Mahamudra pointed out. And they still have this idea there is some state to be achieved, and there are some things which are outside of that state which needs to be gotten rid of in order for that particular state, however it's conceived of, to be accomplished. That's a sign that they haven't understood. Mahamudra is something beyond any notion of there is this particular condition to achieve and there are some things which need to be rejected. Because as the name says, it's Mahamudra, it's this great thing that is relevant to absolutely everything. It's applied to every circumstance of the mind, every movement, every possibility of mind's activity. Mahamudra is the highest way of relating to or being with the mind, and it's the highest way, and it's not at all easy. It is very, very difficult. If we take the example of Naropa, one of our greatest lineage masters, he was a Mahapandita. He was a great scholar. In his university, he was outstanding among all the scholars, among all of the great master scholars. There was nothing he didn't know of the Buddha's teaching. Yet, when it came to his time to understand Mahamudra, even though he had such breadth of learning and meditation experience, when he came to Tilopa to learn, he didn't learn easily. It took 12 years of hardship under Tilopa for that great master of Buddhism to acquire total mastery of Mahamudra. He had to go through a lot of difficulty to achieve that. We cannot say that Mahamudra is easy. It requires great and subtle understanding. And if the mechanisms for that are not in place, then actually we can be wasting a lot of time. That wasted time can be, not to put too fine a word on it, rubbish. And because it requires many things. For instance, many teachers these days, or in many circumstances, we hear a lot of high-flying ideas about Mahamudra, and then in our shrine room we say, now we sit for a while in an unfabricated state. So everyone sits down in an unfabricated state, or beyond conceptual complication. But what actually happens? Are people really sitting in a state beyond conceptual fabrication, or are they sitting within a conceptual fabrication which says beyond conceptual fabrication? In other words, are they dwelling in an idea of being beyond ideas? More than likely the case. And as long as there's any idea of good meditation and bad meditation, that this was smooth, this was quiet, there weren't many thoughts, there was a pleasant experience, a deep experience, a peaceful experience, that was a good meditation, or that was getting close to Mahamudra. And then there's another time when you meditate, the mind's busy and full of neurosis and other things, and you think that was a bad meditation, far away from Mahamudra. Then there isn't at all an understanding of what's trying to be accomplished. There is complication, there is fabrication and artifice. And it's not easy to see beyond that. Without the real Mahamudra that goes beyond those notions of good and bad meditation and applies to absolutely everything that occurs in the mind, without the pointing out or the introduction to what Mahamudra means through the various circumstances and the Master's blessing, then there will never be this ultimate achievement and accomplishment. And Rinpoche says, please think about these points very deeply, about how it's not easy, about how it is all embracing.
Tani ta tiani hiji me pandawo jido dindiji eredina ta mare. Ko ngonto jo bare, gangji yo bare. Ta la tiani ta jitian di titola nona no mombo traba to bare. Tani ta garizo gang bare lana. Koron la yon ta ngaron so yega ji zona. 嘎嘎嘎你是几种有的，别地农药， 코로나 다 고니 셰자지세고 존나 되니 레라보지고 shumare 레라보지고 하고 말해.
So the real authentic Mahamudra is something very difficult to acquire and to master. But it is beyond any of those preconceived notions. That's true, but it doesn't mean that there is nothing to know in terms of Mahamudra. It doesn't mean there's nothing to be known, it's double negative, in terms of Mahamudra, because just like learning the alphabet is the forerunner to learning language, then for Mahamudra we have things that we do, that we practice, that we learn, which step by step take us towards the real and the authentic Mahamudra. So there are things to be known, very helpful things along the way.
Tani tata hipa la kaso humangi ji la ya tepa chenbu 동부 셔라 동네도 때나 파 드니 노라 조혼이 돈이 그때나 파니 다 공사 그 다음에도 취지 다음에서 이어주 되니라 동부 취지 다음에라고 돼 때나 파니 드니 공사 그 다음에 때나 파동지도 대바 전부라 된데 명거 지고 말해 도쇼라 레데 화쇼다 나로서 쇼제 전부도 조바 전부 대차라 다디 취지 다음에도 공사 다음에 해동라고 지세나 동부 공사 그 다음에라고 더 년들라 공사 그 다음에 때나 파도야 다들 먼저 바래디 저도 그 파동 먼저래 되면 다 파지도 지 바라디 네 동부는 공사 그 다음에 더 때나 파반다고 신두 되니 취지 다음에 때나 파반다고 신두 다다 신두 되라는 더 가리려고写되나 동부 농화라 써놓은 동문도 농화되나 바로서 주다 저런다 신두아 뭐야 더차라 써놓은 데 동년문도 동부 너 동이 아니 주라 아니 가리 너 생이 생명이 들이 써놓은 마동 카글이라버리 농화통지 생이 세지 들리라면도 농화통지 동년이라 세지 들리라버리 레디 생라 아니미 문이 레디가 son지 리라버 말이 뭐야 카가 생 문디 동년이 세지 리라버리 레디 매나요 누가 해고도야 대화 해고도야 매파지 레면도야 돈이 째레면도야 말어서라 진짜 누가지 해고도 다다다다 해가 그 텐시 해고도 저 돈이 째레면도 돈이 나들이 해가 그 가르 째라 드릭 누가 요기어래 또 돈이 째레면도 많이 나 돈이 해가는 대용지면도 되나 문이 돈이 돈지 아버지도 하고 그도 되나나 다 바동문화가 니라고지 들이 얘기오래.
As was explained yesterday, there are two main approaches to an understanding of reality, to an understanding of voidness or true nature or reality. The first is the general way of Mahayana, and it starts with an analysis of external things. It establishes their voidness or their nature, through logic, through reason, through analysis, and so on. And then afterwards, having established the non-existence of phenomena, it's called the non-self of phenomena, then from there one can go on to apply that within, to one's own being and experience, to oneself, and understand the non-existence of mind and of own entity, non-existence of personal self. One starts from the non-existence of phenomenal self in what is called the world of appearances. That means what manifests to our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. So by a long process of logic and Mahayana analysis, we establish the voidness, the true nature of those things, of appearances, and then we apply that to mind itself, to the mind which is having those experiences. In the Vajrayana way, the way of Mahamudra, we start not with appearances. what manifests to the mind as seen, heard, smelt, tasted and touched. But we start with the mind itself. And by understanding the mind itself, then we understand any absence of entity, any absence of self in the mind. In terms of words, this is similar to what the Shravakas do. This non-ego, no self, is at the very basics of Buddhism. It's true in terms of words, that's what we're doing. But although the method is different, but intrinsically it's the same thing. We're examining the mind to find if it has any identity, any nature, any characteristics that we could say that is it. And then, once we've explored the mind and this absence of any self or any identity within, then that automatically shows us the absence of identity in mind's radiance, which we call the world or the universe, which we perceive. So it's a different way around of doing it. Now, it's one thing to use words and to say, all that appears is void. It sounds great, it sounds true, and when we hear the words and we understand the idea, then we can take that in one way. But although we can believe that, and although we have the idea in our heads, when the suffering comes along, do we just say, yes, it's just suffering, it's just void? When the happiness comes along, do we say, yes, I'm so happy, but it's just void? No. Even though we know all phenomena are by their very nature, shunyata, voidness, we heard it, we read it in the books, we got it in the teachings, our mouth knows it, but does our mind in its very depths know it, really know it, so that when suffering happens or when happiness happens, automatically they're recognized as being just as void as anything else? No, it's not the case. And so this knowing that we accomplish through the ABC of Mahamudra and of Vajrayana is a real knowing of the mind through direct experience, far away from those easy-to-say words of voidness and beyond conceptual contrivance. We really need to come to experience these things firsthand.
다 드리세 다 가로서 제통도 가르쳐 줘 바래라나 베나 가로서 청고바 다 불리송라고 지나 니바치 소요나 근데 니바도 다 가리 온수도 푸대도 고로 다시 챈디와 다 동봉 건 가니 수서래도 다 가로서 기타도와 근데 푸드 초사도 될 드니 가통하도 내가 gem바통제 오마다다 가통하 차송 영어마도 송송 베 대라고지 가로서 대화이나라 능하이나라 카통하 다 가리랭 거세요 또는 푸지 제지 너주나 드니 네에서도 약고 하고 차지더라 드니 하고지도 우니 던다오지 파체소나 더라 송지시 미파도 그래 네에서도 하고지도 코롱 우니 네에서 하고지도 코롱 파도 우니 코롱 던다오지레 소나 더라는 송지시 파 미도 때문에 gem바체 말이 되나 말어서 능하도 더가리지나 네에서 하마고니 코롱 우니 하마고니 나로 능한 jun도 그래 디 방람텔라 되니 네에서도 코롱 하고 우니 더다오지 파 나로 요래서나 더라 파 송지시 미도 더리라고 지리.
So the way that we really come to know these things, nothing to do with words or intellect, but directly come to know these things, is through observation. And in that sense, we are like a spy. We are like an undercover policeman who is investigating somebody. And so the spy or the policeman who's got however long it takes on the job is writing a very full report. He's observing what goes on here, what goes on there, what the person does there, what they do in this circumstance and in that circumstance. And by the time that spy work or that police work has been fully done, very properly done, there is a very, very, very good understanding of the person who's being spied upon or who's being watched. We know exactly what they do, how they get up to it, when they do it, and so on and so forth. So, in this way, then we need to get to know mind itself by having a very special and most effective way of being aware of it in every different circumstance. And then by the time that work is done, then one has a thorough, irrevocable understanding of the very nature of that mind, the very exactly who and what it is. When that happens, this is what Buddha means, a total understanding of the nature of mind. That's what Buddha is. Buddha means that, total understanding of the nature of mind. And not to understand the mind in that very direct, first-hand way, with no doubt, means to be an ordinary being.
Ni rangtong gangtong tadong, ta rangtong sanong tong tong ta, ta no shou pa la, 50 riba se, jike jin dua, 50 riba. Hoya, 50 sanong tong tong, nian ba ji ore. Hoya, 50 riba. No, ni no len du ba re. Te don, ndan rawo, sapo yo pa ba re. Nda 50 riba ga no nya, jabo da oni se na. 마로서 랑통 온디 선노 동동도 생각 리피그 잡은 것만 들이 뒤 연락하고 쳐디오래 눈이 선노 동나 마로서 ndal은 케바지 쳐나 생각 리바 롱히근 케바지 쳐자바래 생각 리바 생각 선노 동도 해도 니 라히오 바래 더요 눈이 니스 다도 통 야부지레 특히오 바 말에 눈이 근데 랑통로 선노 동도 야부지 동고 야부 인더 강히나 생각 리바데 레 라보 롱히디 쳐디오 바래 저로서 다 성능 통도 가리 초선들이 초선문들 나요 생각이 받지 뭐보다 따마니 떼서 고뉴 가리가리 세효리지 망하마 태완은 디들라 생각이 받게 지가라 로마요레 생각이 받도 무슨이 준대니 다 하고래디 코라 가리가리 생각해 좀 몸을 쳤더니 세디들라나 에 리라보지레 갈리 가보지 뭔데 문이 세거나 나로서 너 야보지히나 생각이 비자보도 나로서 할 계절에 member는 생각이 비 member 뺑게 받지 줘디오래.
The insight that's going into the mind is what we call vipassana, or that's what it means, deep insight, or literally higher insight. And in the West we have what we call psychology. We have the science of psychology, the logic, the logos, the knowledge of the psyche, knowledge of the mind. So vipassana, or this sort of insight, is like the king of psychologies. It's the finest form of psychology. And psychology itself as a discipline is very, very interesting. It's very close to this, because what psychology is trying to do is to understand the way in which the mind works. And it's particularly adapted to illness of the mind when that causes great anguish, but in general it is the study of the mind. And Rinpoche says it's my own opinion, you need to make your own decisions. I don't have that much experience, but amongst other things, one of my students in Taiwan is a teacher of psychology, and we've talked quite a bit about this, but he said to his own mind, he thinks that if one has this deep insight that comes through vipassana, that comes through Mahamudra, that sort of insight into the mind, then all of the rest of psychology will become very easy, because having understood mind from its very deepest and truest nature, then all of the details will flow out from that quite automatically.
Tani? Oh. Yeah, Tani, that's only.
So now the time is racing by, so we'll leave the formal teaching there for this morning, and in tomorrow morning's session then we can carry on with the Vipassana chapter of this text, and this gives us a few minutes for questions. If you...
Yeah. More deep on the land. I got me Pachi. Machigatina and Dimon did that's only patient to so doing some then I got me Pachi he. Nipachi Nahi. Machiga Sony Pache, or doing somebody Sony Hilana Sena Lola Palmandi. Then I long to go Nipas on to Chihili. Takamaka Hindia Travel.
So if there isn't an urgent question, there was something that Rinpoche said he will come back to, and that he will come back to now in response to one of the questions.
Nipachi. Tamipachi the Carrelana. Tangaroso, Hini Gondi Terana, Saint Titi, Nigalese, Tombo Saint de Apochi, the Gondi Terra Saint Nipachi, Yogarelari. Tati Saint Nipata, that's on the tone, right? Tonto Casala, Saint Nisi Pamanditi, Niji Saint Hakuguta. Keniji Casina, not to Mobo Mantropa Saint Man, Lucius and Tindu. Tanto Casala, Saint Dena Pamandu. Oh, yeah, Tani, Takarigandulana, the Saint De Jigati Santa Garita will go targeted. The Chindikin. The Massi Onjere, Massi Onjamari. Maniana San Yore, Yojita, Maniana, oh, that Nidis Yamudi, Coron Nidikin to us on the wrong Hakogu, wrong Hiziki, Nipa can't read. Tomboyo. The Saint Nipajora, Nipi Santa. No, Massi, oh, Nidikin Mupora, what in the Dikin on the Onsajere, Massi Onsajamare. Mumejire tangere, Conco Maneji. Rete, Maniananda, Niananda. Oh, Saint Co, that the rich rengas on the wrong pay. Yella hat is it. Wrong. Pianana, Baronda which is sina. Wrong, young Cotua Cario Hacomedi. The coron, there is a trying on the dealer. Oh, Namonda when you ask on the coron Hacondua. Petenda water. Saint Maniana, Saint Mani be Saint Coron, only duas on the Niena, Niepisan, and Nidua, so the Haku to Tarazon Tongu. Oh, yeah, that me by the Molai.
Since we're saying this is in response to something you asked, I don't know, it doesn't matter, it's interesting anyway. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Let me explain this. I mean, it's interesting, it's very relevant, so otherwise I'll lose it. The insight meditation, the vipassana, it's been said a few times that the shamatha, the peaceful abiding, is the support for it. It's very, very necessary for getting the insight. But it doesn't mean that that insight always depends on shamatha. It doesn't mean we're always going to need a peacefully settled mind in order to have insight. That's not the equation. But the peacefully settled mind becomes the basis for developing insight, and then that insight is something that eventually will be acquired in all circumstances. But when the mind is peacefully settled, once that is peacefully settled, then within that peace, what the insight is focused on the mind which is peaceful, the mind which is settled. It's not on the peacefulness itself, that's not important, but this mind which is settled is being investigated to be known. How is it? Where is it? What's it like? Now, when we practice the training, the ABC of insight meditation, then it doesn't matter whether we actually find something that we can be expressed or not. It's not a question of finding it or not finding it. It's a question of looking for it and then discovering what happens when you look for it. It's this actual fact of the mind trying to know itself when it's settled, which is the insight. And then as it tries to find, whether it finds or not, or whatever it finds or doesn't find, that very fact of looking gives it a direct experience of itself, which is the working material for then going on and on and on and on in the process of insight. And the analogy for this, very famous one, is the taste of sugar, taste of molasses or sugar. And there, if you've not had the experience, no words can convey it. What you have to do is actually put it on your tongue, and then that taste of sugar is directly experienced, and that taste is totally intimate. Only you can have it, because it's on your tongue, can't be described, can't be shared, but you're directly having it. So, like this one point here is that the insight is the mind's own experience of itself, which starts when the mind is settled, because then we have some opportunity to explore it.
Dimendo ta gong chu ma ji ba ma ji ba ya za ya se den zi ya de na ko hi ni ya da re de ba re de ma lang tong ten ro kyo ba ma re lang tong le ni pa jian de gong ji ha go o tan de re song ji ji da sen gong ngo de ha go ga ba re ta ha ma go na de lang tong ten ro te kyo ba ma re de na na ta u su de ye ga ta lang tong la mi pa mo bo yo re de ta mi pa Bena Hinela Mipambo Sua, Tandaway Lanton, Ta Kungo, Mipa, Tombo, Gado, Ta Usutre. Then you tell her, the son of Tonji, the Paras, Shala son of Tonji Mandu, winning Nipacha gone, Gundu, Sala. Dana, that there is only Yapogon Holucha. Then you also only Nipakiona, the Yapoti gone, Nipat Lila Buchi Hakondu. The Mahina Nipa somebody Hakomandu. Karidina, San, Yiki de Mary, Yet Makina, the Nayano Yabahakumadu. Then in Nipa Janda, Gomba Matu, Nono Matina, the Tahako Cherry, Tinana, Maroso, Ta Ganlins in Dumandupa, Hiniti to Yonkaina. Only that, the Gondi sent that, the Chinchi, the Tadagundu, the Tayotagasing, Talatosi Yapuchi.
The settled mind gives us the opportunity for this mind which is settled to start to investigate itself, know itself. Not at all in a discursive way, not at all. It's not the mind thinking about itself. It's the mind vividly aware of itself, directly catching itself, knowing itself on the spot. And so when the mind is quiet and settled, it gives us this first opportunity to say, not to say, to be aware of what is this mind which is settled. Just now, in this calmness, in this peace of shamatha, what is it that is peaceful? And we are aware of that directly, observe it directly. Where is it? What is it like? Does it have a shape, a colour, a place? And we need to actually do that. We need to actually, in that peacefulness, start to cultivate this on-the-spot, direct awareness. This is the training. This is the first letter of the alphabet of insight meditation. And this leads on, just as in shamatha meditation, we have many different types of mind focus, the pebble, the outside one, the inside one. As we develop this insight, there will be many things and many ways of looking at the mind with the mind. And the very first one starts when the mind is settled, and within that peacefulness, then that mind which is peaceful is aware of itself, to find, without asking intellectual questions, just to be vividly aware, where is this? Where is it happening? What is it that is peaceful? And so Rinpoche said, between today and tomorrow, if some of you have a bit of experience with shamatha, and you can have this peaceful settling of the mind, then please, if you can do that, within that peaceful settling, just try to let that mind which is peacefully settled know itself, where it is, how it is. Then this will be the step for going forward. And this is so different from all the words which tell us the mind is like this, the mind is void, the mind is beyond conceptual fabrication. That's just ideas. We need to forget that, and now it's the very real, on-the-spot investigation.
Teni te trawachi kochu ta kama ni sandu trawachi kera teni te.
We've got 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe that's time for a question. Sounds optimistic, but yeah. So. All right. The lamtonge cup, which is là, then the control, you know, then the control la gomso karare.
Yeah. Ta mi pate ya pochi chakido teni soni no ne kale zo mi pan jinga ke chareta.
This is coming soon to a shrine room near you. And no, what Rinpoche says is, if you do what he just described, this is the first step, and then what we'll see in the days to come is that from that first step, then we go on, and then using anger and the emotions comes later.
Tata mi pachite je te apo ha kona teni control the le labo ji karizo gang ha ko ndu tata de apo ji de ha ma na teni control teni gang chi ma du teni na ige tata di yo de teni ya ndo gu.
If we haven't got on top of this first step of insight meditation just described, then there is no way that we'll be able to go on to work with the anger. If we have practiced well this first step, then dealing with anger will be no problem.
Pena dojo he don tu nga ja ta cha ra wi na tombo ka ha ka nga ya po chi na tani tu ye ra je le la bon du ka ha ka nga te ni ma chi na tu ye ru ru she ga na lo chi ma du pe tin ra wo re ke ta ta tani ya po chi di re ha ko na tani ta cha la pe le la bo chi ha ko du.
Come back to the analogy of learning the alphabet, and then once you've got the alphabet, then putting the letters together, and the words and the ideas comes naturally. If somebody's not got the alphabet, then how can they do the other things? So this very first thing of the mind being aware of itself when it's peacefully settled needs to be well done first.
Lami
be den ba don kan nya yong la de je yong hua da xie ma lu so so de yong ni no do